Maya Thompson was already 3 seconds from losing it when she spotted the matte black G-Wagon sprawled across both executive parking spots like it paid rent on the whole damn garage. She just survived a 2-hour budget review where her boss had taken credit for her restructuring plan. Again. And now this. Some careless driver was blocking Mr. Hargrove's reserved space, the one she needed clear so the man could make his 11 a.m. investor call without delay. Maya didn't have time for nonsense today. She marched straight up, rapped her knuckles hard on the driver's window and didn't wait for permission. This is executive parking. Move the vehicle, now. The window slid down with a soft electric hum. Dark eyes met hers. Steady, unreadable, framed by features that belonged on boardroom magazine covers rather than behind the wheel of someone else's ride. No uniform, no company logo, just tailored charcoal wool and the faint scent of expensive cedar cologne drifting out. Hi family, I need you to please help subscribe and watch my video to the end. Please remember to subscribe to my channel. Let us continue. He studied her for 2 full beats before speaking, voice low and even. You always approach strangers like they owe you an explanation. Maya didn't flinch. I approach people who are in my boss's spot like they're costing the company money, which they are. Move it. A ghost of something, amusement, maybe interest, flickered across his face. He opened the door and stepped out in one fluid motion. 6'3" at least. Shoulders that filled space without trying. He shut the door and leaned a hip against the hood, arms casually crossed. Interesting, he said. And who exactly is your boss? Elliot Hargrove, Senior VP, Mergers and Acquisitions. She lifted her chin. You're in his space. The man tilted his head slightly. Elliot Hargrove works for me. A pause, deliberate. I'm Damien Voss. The name hit like a cold slap. Damien Voss, majority owner, founder, the shadow who controlled Voss Enterprises without ever needing to raise his voice in public. The man whose signature turned 9-figure deals into footnotes. The man she had just publicly dressed down in front of God and the security cameras. Heat crawled up Maya's neck, but she locked her knees and held his gaze. She would not crumble. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He simply watched her, measuring. Most people would be apologizing by now. Most people didn't just watch their work get claimed by someone else this morning, she answered, voice level. I protect my team's time, even if it means telling the owner he's parked like an asshole. A real pause this time, then the corner of his mouth lifted just enough to hint at approval. Noted. He turned toward the private elevator without another word, leaving the G-Wagon exactly where it sat. Maya remained rooted, heart slamming against her ribs, the echo of her own voice ringing in her ears. She had no way of knowing that single, reckless moment had just rewritten her next 12 months. 48 hours after the parking lot confrontation, Maya received the email that changed everything. Subject, immediate transfer effective immediately. From Executive Services. To Maya Thompson. Report to the 42nd floor, West Wing, tomorrow at 8:00 a.m. Your new role, Strategic Assistant to the Chairman. All prior responsibilities reassigned. HR has been notified, no discussion required. She read it twice, pulse spiking each time. Strategic Assistant to the Chairman. Damien Voss didn't have assistants. He had teams of analysts, directors, and vice presidents who handled his orbit from a safe distance. This wasn't a promotion. This was a summons. The next morning, she stepped off the private elevator into silence so thick it felt engineered. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the city skyline. The only sound was the soft click of her heels on marble. A woman in a crisp navy blazer met her at the threshold. Ms. Thompson, right this way. No small talk, no orientation packet, just a swift walk past closed doors until they reached the corner office. The assistant knocked once, then opened the door and stepped aside. Damien stood at the window, back to the room, hands in his pockets as he watched morning traffic crawl far below. He didn't turn immediately. When he did, his expression held no trace of the parking lot amusement, only cool assessment. "Sit," he said. Maya chose the chair opposite the wide desk, spine straight. She refused to fidget. He moved behind the desk but didn't sit. Instead, he leaned forward, palms flat on the glass surface. "You're here because you demonstrated spine. I don't surround myself with people who shrink when challenged. I need someone who will tell me when I'm wrong, even when it's inconvenient." Her throat tightened. "And if I say no?" "You won't." A statement, not a question. "You've spent 2 years fighting for visibility in a division that barely notices talent unless it wears a corner office. This is visibility. Maximum." Maya met his gaze without blinking. "Visibility comes with a target on my back. Everyone will assume I'm here because I mouthed off to the boss, not because I earned it." "Correct," he straightened. "They'll whisper, they'll speculate. Let them. The only opinion that matters in this room is mine, and right now it's that you belong here." He slid a slim folder across the desk. Inside, her new contract, triple her current salary, equity grant, direct reporting line to him, access to every level of the organization. She scanned the pages, mind racing. This wasn't revenge. This was calculation. He wanted her close enough to test, to push, to see how far that boldness extended when the stakes were his empire instead of a parking spot. She closed the folder. "What's the first thing you need?" A faint curve touched his mouth, not quite a smile. "Proof you can handle pressure without folding. We start in 10 minutes. Board briefing. You'll sit at my right. Take notes. Speak only if I ask. Observe everything." He walked to the door, paused. "One more thing. The G-Wagon is still in the same 2 spots. I like symmetry." Maya exhaled once he was gone. Her hands trembled for only a second before she steadied them. She had just been pulled into the gravitational center of Voss Enterprises, and the man at its core clearly intended to keep her there until he decided otherwise. She stood, smoothed her blazer, and followed him into the unknown. Maya followed Damien through the double doors into the executive boardroom exactly 8 minutes later. The long ebony table was already occupied by 7 senior executives, each one turning in unison as the chairman entered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes flicked to the woman trailing him, unfamiliar face, no title on the agenda, yet seated at his immediate right. She took the chair without hesitation, opened her tablet, and began logging notes as though she had done it 100 times. Damien settled at the head, gave a single nod, and the briefing began. The topic was the pending acquisition of a mid-sized logistics firm in the Midwest. Numbers scrolled across the wall screen: revenue projections, synergy estimates, integration costs. The lead strategist, a silver-haired VP named Reynolds, presented with practiced confidence, recommending full speed ahead. The room murmured agreement until Damien turned to Maya. "Observations." Every head swiveled. She felt the weight of their scrutiny but kept her voice even. "The synergy targets assume a 92% retention rate of the acquired company's driver workforce. Historical data from your last 3 logistics deals shows an average 68% retention after year 1, mostly because integration slashed overtime pay and shifted schedules without notice. If we repeat the pattern, we're looking at union pressure, turnover spikes, and delivery delays that could erase half the projected savings." Reynolds stiffened. "We've already modeled conservative scenarios." "You modeled attrition at industry average," Maya cut in smoothly. "Not at the rate triggered by your specific playbook. The union filed grievances in 2 of those prior deals. 1 went to arbitration, cost us $11 million we never recouped." Silence stretched. Damien's gaze remained fixed on her, unreadable. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Respectfully, Ms. Thompson," Damien supplied, tone flat. "And she's correct. The arbitration figure is public record. You left it out of the deck." The VP's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Damien leaned back. "Rework the retention model. Factor in the actual post-acquisition churn from the last cycle. Present revised figures by end of day tomorrow. Meeting adjourned." Chairs scraped as the room emptied. Maya stayed seated, waiting for the reprimand she half expected. Instead, Damien remained where he was, studying the now-dark screen. "You didn't need my permission to speak," he said quietly. "I spoke because you asked." He turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. "And you were right. I knew the retention numbers were soft. I wanted to see if anyone else would call it." Maya held his stare. "So this was a test?" "Everything is." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "You passed. Most people in your chair would have nodded along and hoped the mistake stayed buried until it was someone else's problem." She rose too, gathering her things. "I don't bury problems, I surface them." For the first time since the parking garage, something warmer flickered behind his guarded expression. Respect, sharp and unmistakable. "Good," he said, "because the next 12 months are going to surface a lot of them." He walked out first, leaving the door open behind him. Maya lingered a moment, adrenaline still humming under her skin. She had just contradicted the chairman in front of his inner circle, and instead of being dismissed, she had earned a sliver more of his attention. The intellectual friction between them had begun to spark, quiet but undeniable, and neither of them pretended it hadn't. Maya stepped out of the boardroom, still riding the quiet high of being proven right, when her phone buzzed with an urgent internal alert. The subject line was blunt: crisis, immediate action required. By the time she reached her new desk outside Damien's office, the story had already broken across 3 major financial outlets. Headlines screamed variations of the same accusation. Voss Enterprises accused of insider trading in Midwest logistics bid. Confidential documents surface. Anonymous sources claimed Damien had received non-public information about a competitor's failed bid days before announcing his own offer, giving Voss an illegal edge. The news cycle moved fast. Social media amplified it. Stock tickers dipped 3 points in after-hours trading. Maya didn't wait for direction. She pulled up the leaked documents, grainy scans of emails and term sheets, cross-referenced timestamps, IP logs, and metadata with internal records. Within 40 minutes, she had a timeline that didn't add up. She knocked once and entered without waiting for an invitation. Damien was already on a secure line, voice clipped, fielding calls from legal and investor relations. He glanced up, eyes narrowing at the tablet in her hand. "Talk," he said, ending the call mid-sentence. Maya set the device on his desk and tapped the screen. The confidential documents were sent from an external server at 3:47 a.m. last Thursday, after our bid was already locked and filed with regulators. The competitor's rejection letter is timestamped 4:12 a.m. same day. Whoever leaked this doctored the chain to make it look like we had the intel first. It's a plant. He scanned the timeline she'd built, expression unchanging. Source still tracing, but the email header's route through a burner domain registered 2 days ago in the Caymans. Amateur hour. They wanted it discovered. Damien exhaled through his nose, the only sign the hit had landed. "Board's already demanding my head on a call in 20. Press office is drafting a denial. It won't hold if the narrative sticks." "It won't stick if we move faster." Maya met his gaze levelly. "Counter-release the real timeline. Show the bid submission receipt from Wednesday afternoon public record. Attach the competitor's actual rejection email, which we can subpoena if needed but already exists in our merger folder. No emotion, no defensiveness. Just facts that make their story collapse under basic chronology." He studied her for a beat. "You're volunteering to ghostwrite the statement." "I'm volunteering to make sure it's airtight before anyone else touches it." He pushed back from the desk. "Do it, copy no one, send it to me only, we'll root through legal after." She worked in silence at the small conference table in the corner of his office while he handled back-to-back calls. Every so often she felt his attention shift to her, brief, assessing glances that lingered longer than necessary. By the time she hit send, the draft was stripped to cold precision. Dates, filings, contradictions. No apologies. No excuses. Damien read it on his phone, standing at the window. When he finished, he didn't comment on the wording. He simply said, "Good. It goes out in 10. The statement dropped 20 minutes later. Within the hour, 2 of the original outlets issued corrections. The third quietly pulled the article. Stock recovered 2 points before close. The crisis didn't vanish, but it stopped bleeding. Later, after the last call ended and the floor quieted, Damien crossed to where she still sat, reviewing follow-up wires. He stopped beside her chair, close enough that she caught the faint warmth of him. "You didn't hesitate," he said quietly. "Most people would have waited for instruction, or at least asked if I was guilty." Maya looked up. "I don't need to ask, I trust the numbers, and the numbers don't lie." Something shifted in his expression, subtle, unguarded for the first time. Not gratitude exactly. Deeper, the beginning of reliance. "Neither do you," he replied. He walked away first, leaving her with the echo of those 3 words and the realization that trust, once given by Damien Voss, was rarer and heavier than any title he could offer. Maya followed Damien out of the office that evening, still processing the weight of the day's victory over the scandal. He didn't speak until they reached the rooftop helipad where the company's Sikorsky waited, rotors already turning in the dusk. "New York," he said simply. "Midnight closing on the logistics deal. Wheels up in 7 minutes." She boarded behind him, settling into the cream leather seat across the narrow aisle. The cabin was quiet luxury. Soft ambient lighting, no excess, just function wrapped in understated expense. The door sealed, engines deepened, and the city dropped away beneath them. They flew in near silence for the first hour. Damien reviewed documents on his tablet. Maya answered emails, fielding the last ripples from the press release. Then moderate turbulence hit, nothing dangerous, but enough to rattle the glasses in their holders and make the jet dip once, sharply. Maya gripped the armrest. Damien glanced over, noticed the tension in her knuckles, and set his tablet aside. First time in rough air. First time at 35,000 feet in a storm cell, she admitted, voice steady despite the white-knuckled hold. He unbuckled and moved to the seat beside her, not touching, just closer. The shift felt deliberate, protective without being overt. "It'll smooth out above 8,000, always does." She exhaled slowly. "You sound like you've talked yourself through worse." "I have." He leaned back, gaze fixed on the dark window where lightning flickered in the distance. 10 years ago I lost everything I'd built up to that point. Partner, someone I trusted more than family, diverted funds, forged signatures, left me holding the debt when the SEC came knocking. I clawed back from zero, slept on a friend's couch for 6 months, ate instant noodles, built this. He gestured faintly at the cabin around them, from nothing but spite in 16-hour days. Maya turned toward him. The mask he usually wore in the office had slipped. What remained was raw, unguarded fatigue. And the betrayal. "Taught me 2 things. His voice dropped lower. People will always choose self-interest when the stakes are high, and the only way to survive is to become the one setting the stakes. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the hard line of his jaw. Maya studied him, not the billionaire, but the man who'd rebuilt an empire from ashes. "You still carry it," she said quietly. "The weight. I see it in the way you never fully relax, even when the room bows to you." He met her eyes then, something unguarded flickering there. Most people don't notice, or if they do, they pretend not to. "I'm not most people." "No," he agreed, the word soft, almost reverent. "You're not." The turbulence eased as promised. The jet leveled, engines settling into a steady hum. Neither moved back to their separate seats. The space between them shrank, not physically, but in the quiet understanding that had settled like a shared secret. Maya felt the pull first, the dangerous, magnetic awareness of a man who commanded empires yet chose, in this suspended moment, to let her see the cracks. Damien felt it too. His gaze lingered on her mouth for half a heartbeat longer than professional courtesy allowed, then returned to her eyes with deliberate restraint. Neither spoke of it, they didn't need to. When the captain announced descent into Teterboro, Damien stood first, offering her his hand to steady herself against the slight bank. His fingers closed briefly around hers, warm, sure, gone too soon. They stepped off the jet into cold New York air, side by side. The night ahead thick with closing documents and unspoken tension. Whatever had shifted between them at 35,000 feet wasn't going back into its box. They stepped off the jet into the biting New York night, Damien's driver already waiting on the tarmac with the black Escalade idling. The closing dinner was set for a private room at a discreet midtown steakhouse. No flash, just the key principals and their legal teams. Maya slid into the back seat beside him, the leather cool against her legs. Neither spoke during the short ride. The silence between them felt charged, still carrying the residue of altitude and confession. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere shifted the moment they entered. The table of 8 rose briefly in deference. Damien took the head position. Maya was directed to the chair at his right, standard protocol now, but the shift drew immediate glances. A hedge fund partner named Claire Langford, sharp-eyed and silver-haired, arched a brow as Maya sat. Across from them, 2 junior associates exchanged quick looks that weren't subtle. The meal progressed smoothly until dessert. Claire leaned forward, wineglass in hand, voice carrying just enough to reach the entire table. So, Maya, how exactly does one go from challenging the chairman in a parking lot to sitting at his right hand in under 3 months? Impressive trajectory. Must be quite the working relationship. The implication landed like a dropped fork. Heads turned. One of the associates smirked behind his napkin. Maya felt heat rise but kept her expression neutral. Before she could respond, Damien set his coffee cup down with deliberate calm. "Claire," he said, tone even, professional. "Maya is here because she surfaces risks others miss and solves problems before they become headlines. She earned the seat the same way you earned yours. Results. If anyone at this table has an issue with talent rising on merit, they can raise it with me directly. Otherwise, let's keep the conversation on the closing terms." The table stilled. Claire's smile tightened into something polite and thin. "Of course, Damien, no issue here." She lifted her glass in a small, belated toast. "To merit." The moment passed. Conversation resumed around deal mechanics, warranties, escrow adjustments, final signatures, but the undercurrent lingered. Maya felt eyes on her again later when she stepped away to the restroom. Whispers trailed her down the hallway, low enough to pretend they weren't meant to be heard. "She's young, too close. You know how these things go." When she returned, Damien was already standing, signaling the end of the evening. He waited until the others filed out, then turned to her in the now empty private room. The staff had cleared everything but their 2 chairs. "They'll keep talking," he said quietly. "It's easier to assume favoritism than admit someone new is better at the job." Maya met his gaze. "I don't need special treatment. I need the work to speak for itself." "It already does." He stepped closer, not crowding, just enough to lower his voice further. "And I won't let anyone undermine that. Not tonight. Not ever." His words carried quiet steel, protective in a way that felt personal without crossing into sentiment. Maya felt the warmth of it settle low in her chest, steadying rather than unsettling. She nodded once. They left together, shoulders nearly brushing as they walked to the waiting car. Outside, the city lights streaked past in silence. Damien didn't reach for her hand, didn't need to. The public defense he just delivered, measured, unequivocal, had drawn a clearer line than any private gesture could. Loyalty deepened in that moment, rooted not in affection alone, but in mutual respect forged under scrutiny. When the Escalade pulled up to her hotel, he waited until she stepped out, then spoke through the open door. "Tomorrow's signing is at 9. I'll see you in the lobby at 8:30. She paused, hand on the frame. "I'll be there." He held her gaze a beat longer than necessary before the door closed between them. As the car pulled away, Maya stood on the curb, city noise rushing back in, feeling the invisible tether between them tighten just enough to remind her it existed. Maya stepped into the hotel lobby the next morning at exactly 8:30, already dressed for the signing in a tailored navy suit that matched the city's sharp winter light. Damien waited near the revolving doors, phone in hand, but he pocketed it the moment he saw her. His gaze swept over her once, brief, appreciative, restrained before he nodded toward the waiting car. The charity event wasn't on the original itinerary. A last-minute pivot. One of the closing investors had requested a private pre-signing reception at the pier to celebrate momentum. Damien had agreed, mostly because refusing would have raised more questions than attending. Maya understood the subtext. Appearance mattered as much as the ink on the contracts. They arrived at the hotel ballroom just as the morning crowd thickened. Crystal flutes of sparkling water circulated on trays. Low jazz drifted from a corner trio. The room held perhaps 60 people, investors, legal counsel, a handful of nonprofit board members whose causes would benefit from the evening's donations. Damien moved through the space with practiced ease, shaking hands, exchanging quiet words. Maya stayed a half step behind, observing, ready with details if needed. Half an hour in, a man approached her while Damien was momentarily pulled into a conversation with the foundation chair. Tall, silver at the temples, expensive watch catching the light. He introduced himself as Victor Hale, private equity, one of the minority stakeholders in the logistics deal. "Ms. Thompson," he said, smile easy and practiced. "I've heard you're the one keeping Damien on his toes these days, rare commodity in this room." Maya offered a polite nod. "I just make sure the numbers add up." Victor chuckled, stepping a fraction closer. "Modest, I like that. Most people here lead with their title." His gaze lingered. "You should let me buy you a real drink sometime off the clock. I know places in this city that don't make the guidebooks." Before she could formulate the courteous deflection, she felt the shift in the air. Damien excused himself from his conversation with fluid precision and crossed the room. He didn't interrupt. He simply arrived at her side, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers, and placed a steady hand at the small of her back, not possessive in a showy way, but unmistakable in its intent. "Victor," he said, voice smooth, neutral, "I see you've met my strategic lead." Victor's smile faltered for a split second. "We were just getting acquainted." Damien's hand remained where it was, warm through the fabric of her jacket. "Good. Maya's the reason the deal closed ahead of schedule. She'll be running point on integration." His tone stayed professional, but the subtext was clear. Territory marked, conversation concluded. Victor raised his glass in a small retreat. "Then I'll leave you both to it. Congratulations on the close." He drifted away. Damien didn't remove his hand immediately. Instead, he leaned in just enough for his words to reach her alone. "You handled that well." "I was about to," she murmured, a faint smile tugging at her mouth. "I know." His thumb moved once, barely a brush, against the curve of her spine before he dropped his hand. "But I didn't feel like watching him try." The admission hung between them, quiet and adult. No drama, no declaration. Just the raw edge of wanting, controlled with iron discipline. Maya felt heat bloom low in her stomach, steady and undeniable. She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. "You don't have to watch," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." His gaze darkened for a heartbeat, pure heat quickly banked. Noted. They moved back into the crowd together, shoulders aligned, the space between them electric with what neither had yet named. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of handshakes and small talk, but every time someone approached her too closely, Damien was already there, subtle, unhurried, a quiet claim that needed no words. When they finally stepped into the elevator alone, headed to the signing suite upstairs, he pressed the button and turned to face her fully. The doors closed. The car began its smooth ascent. He didn't speak. He simply reached out, fingertips grazing her wrist, light, deliberate, then let his hand fall away as the elevator chimed at their floor. The doors opened. They stepped out side by side, the tension between them coiled tighter than ever, waiting for the right moment to unravel. The signing suite on the 42nd floor overlooked Midtown's glittering grid, but the view felt distant as Maya reviewed the final integration memo Damien had forwarded at dawn. Buried in the appendix was a single line that stopped her cold. Phase II workforce optimization, targeted reduction of 1,400 positions across 3 distribution centers to achieve 18% cost synergy. She cross-checked the numbers against the original due diligence report. The cuts weren't driven by redundancy. They were driven by margin targets pushed forward to satisfy activist shareholders breathing down the board's neck. The affected facilities were in small towns already hit hard by automation, places where those jobs were the difference between stability and food bank lines. By the time Damien entered the suite, Maya had printed the relevant pages and laid them out on the conference table like evidence. He paused in the doorway, reading her posture before he read the documents. "You've seen the Phase II plan. I've seen the human cost behind the spreadsheet." She kept her voice level professional. "These aren't numbers. They're families. Single parents, veterans, people who have worked those lines for 20 years. You're about to sign off on dismantling their livelihoods to hit a quarterly number that won't even move the stock price more than a point." Damien closed the door behind him. No defensiveness, just measured calm. "The board approved the target 6 months ago. We're contractually obligated to deliver the synergies or face clawbacks on the purchase price. Walking away now triggers penalties that could cost us north of $80 million. And keeping the jobs costs people their security." She stepped closer to the table, fingers resting on the redacted employee roster. "There's another path. Delay the cuts 18 months. Use the time to retrain and redeploy. The savings still materialize, just slower. The difference is we don't leave entire communities in freefall." He studied the pages, then her. "You think the board will accept slower returns because it's the right thing?" "I think the board follows the man who sets the tone." Her eyes held his without flinching. "You built this company from betrayal and grit. You know what it feels like to lose ground you fought for. If you sign this as is, you're choosing profit over principle. That's not the legacy you've spent a decade protecting." Silence stretched between them, thick with the gravity of what she just asked. Damien moved to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city that never paused. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "I've made ruthless calls before. Always told myself the greater good justified it. The company survives, jobs are created elsewhere, the machine keeps turning. But this," he turned back to her, "this feels different, because you're standing here asking me to look at the faces behind the line item." Maya didn't soften the challenge, "Then look." He crossed back to the table, picked up the roster, scanned the names. Something shifted in his expression, conflict, raw and unfiltered. He set the page down. "I need 24 hours, he said finally, "to run the alternative numbers myself. No consultants, no board input, just me and the data." She nodded once. "That's all I'm asking. Time to decide who you want to be when the ink dries." He held her gaze longer than necessary, the air between them heavy with more than business. Respect had long since turned into something deeper. Now it collided head-on with conscience. She saw the war in his eyes, the empire he'd rebuilt versus the man she believed he could still become. Damien exhaled, slow and deliberate. "You're the only person who's ever made me question a decision this late in the game. And you're the only person who can change the outcome," she replied softly. He stepped closer, close enough that she felt the warmth radiating from him, the tension coiled in his frame. For a moment neither moved, the unspoken pull between them sharpening into something almost painful. Then he reached out, brushed a stray strand of hair from her temple with the back of his knuckles, gentle, deliberate, gone in an instant. "I'll have an answer by tomorrow morning," he said, "before the ink touches paper." Maya nodded, heart steady despite the storm inside her chest. She turned to leave the suite but paused at the door. "Whatever you decide," she told him quietly, "I'll respect it, but I won't stay silent if it's the wrong call." His mouth curved, just a fraction bittersweet. "I'm counting on that." She walked out, leaving him alone with the documents and the weight of a choice that would define more than a single deal. Maya left the signing suite and didn't look back. The hallway stretched long and quiet. Her footsteps echoed against marble until she reached the bank of elevators. She pressed the down button once, then waited with the calm of someone who had already made the decision hours earlier. Back in her hotel room, she opened her laptop and drafted the resignation letter in under 10 minutes. No accusations, no emotional flourish, just clarity. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as strategic assistant to the chairman. I have valued the opportunity to contribute at the highest level and the trust placed in me. However, the direction of the Phase II integration plan conflicts with the principles I cannot compromise. I wish Voss Enterprises continued success. She attached the signed PDF to an email addressed to Damien and HR, copied no one else, and hit send at 11:47. Then she closed the laptop, packed her suitcase with methodical care, and booked the first available flight back to Chicago for the following morning. Sleep came in fragments. When dawn filtered through the curtains, she was already dressed and ready. She left the key card on the dresser, took the service elevator to avoid the lobby, and slipped into a waiting rideshare without fanfare. The flight was uneventful. She stared out at the clouds the entire way, replaying the last conversation in the suite, not with regret, but with the quiet certainty that she had said exactly what needed saying. She had challenged him because she believed he was capable of choosing differently. If he didn't, she couldn't stay and watch. Back in her apartment that afternoon, she unpacked in silence. The city noise felt distant, muted. She made coffee, sat at the small kitchen table, and opened her personal email for the first time in weeks. Notifications piled up, colleagues reaching out, old contacts checking in, but nothing from him. She hadn't expected anything immediately. Damien didn't chase. He decided. Across town, in the midtown office that still smelled faintly of fresh ink and coffee from the signing, Damien sat alone at his desk. The Phase II memo lay open in front of him, red-marked with the alternative timeline Maya had sketched in the margin the night before. He had run the numbers himself until 4 a.m., every scenario, every variable. The slower path preserved jobs without tanking the deal's overall value. The board would grumble, shareholders would question, but the math held. He had already drafted the revised directive to the integration team. Delay cuts, invest in retraining, accept the 18-month glide path. The email sat unsent in his drafts folder. Then he opened his inbox and saw her resignation. He read it twice. No anger rose, only a hollow recognition. She hadn't stormed out. She hadn't demanded he change his mind. She had simply drawn the line, stated her position, and walked across it, calm, mature, final. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, the silence of his office felt too large. He had surrounded himself with people who agreed, deferred, executed. Maya was the only one who had ever looked at him and asked him to be better, not out of fear or ambition, but because she saw the capacity in him to choose it. He realized with a clarity that bordered on pain that she had become essential, not to the company, to him. The empire he had rebuilt was intact. The deal had closed, but the woman who had forced him to confront the cost of winning was gone, because he hadn't moved fast enough to prove he was listening. He closed the laptop, stood, crossed to the window and looked down at the city that never waited. Then he made one decision that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or board approval. He would go to her. Not to argue, not to persuade, to acknowledge what she had forced him to see and to ask quietly if there was still space for him on the right side of her line. Damien Voss did not announce his arrival. He simply appeared at the door of Maya's modest Chicago apartment building at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday evening, rain still clinging to the shoulders of his dark wool coat. The doorman recognized him from the single photo that had ever circulated publicly and buzzed him through without a word. He took the stairs, 4 flights, because the elevator felt too slow for what he needed to say. When he reached her floor, he paused outside 4C, knuckles hovering over the wood for 3 full seconds before he knocked. Firm. Once. No urgency, no demand. Inside, Maya had been reading on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, a half-finished cup of tea cooling on the side table. The knock startled her. No one visited unannounced. She set the book down, crossed the small living room, and opened the door without checking the peephole. He stood there, rain-damp hair pushed back, eyes steady, carrying nothing but himself. "Damien," she said, voice even, though her pulse betrayed her. "May I come in?" She stepped aside. He entered, closing the door softly behind him. The apartment was warm, lived in, books stacked on every surface, a single lamp casting amber light across the rug. No grand views, no excess, just space that felt like her. He didn't sit. He remained near the entry, hands loose at his sides. "I read your letter, then I read it again." Maya crossed her arms loosely, not defensive, just waiting. "I sent the revised integration directive this morning," he continued. 18-month delay on reductions, retraining budget approved. The board will fight me on the timeline, but the numbers hold. The communities stay intact. A small exhale. "You were right. I needed the 24 hours you gave me to see it clearly." She studied him, the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes, the way he held himself with the same quiet command he always had, yet something softer beneath it now. "I'm glad," she said simply. "That's the choice I hoped you'd make." He took one step closer. "I didn't come here to tell you I fixed it. I came because I realized something when I saw your resignation hit my inbox." His voice lowered, deliberate. "You're the only person who's ever walked away from me without hesitation. Not out of anger, not to hurt me, but because staying would have meant betraying what you stand for. That kind of integrity, I've spent years building walls to protect myself from anything less." Maya didn't interrupt. She let him speak. "I respect your mind more than I've ever respected anyone's," he said. "The way you see angles I miss, the way you hold a line without bending, the way you make me want to be better not for optics but because you believe I can be." He paused, gaze never leaving hers. "And yes, I want more than your mind in the room with me. I want you beside me, in the office, in the quiet moments after, in whatever comes next." No grand declaration, no promise of forever wrapped in poetry, just truth, stated plainly, the way he conducted every deal that mattered. Maya felt the words settle over her like steady rain, cool, cleansing, undeniable. She uncrossed her arms, let them fall to her sides. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring," she told him. "I left because I cared enough to protect what matters to me, including you, the version of you that chooses principle over expediency." He nodded once, understanding exactly what she meant. She took the final step that closed the distance between them, not rushing, intentional, her hand lifted, fingertips brushing the damp lapel of his coat. "If we do this, business, life, all of it, it's partnership, equal, no hierarchy, no special treatment, just 2 people who challenge each other to be better." "Equal," he echoed, voice rough with something unguarded. His hand covered hers where it rested against his chest, warm palm pressing her fingers over the steady beat beneath. "I don't want anything less." For the first time since the parking garage, neither of them pulled away first. Maya rose on her toes. He met her halfway. The kiss was slow, deliberate, years of tension uncoiling into something quiet and certain. No fireworks, just the deep, adult recognition that they had both chosen this moment, this person, without reservation. When they parted, foreheads resting together, he spoke against her skin. "Come back, not as my assistant, as my partner, the title we figure out together." She smiled, small, real. "We'll negotiate the terms." "Always," he murmured. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, the apartment felt fuller than it had in weeks. They stayed like that a long time, standing in the soft lamplight, hands still linked, the future unfolding not in grand gestures, but in the simple, intentional space they now shared.